He was just trying to catch his flight. First-class ticket in hand, documents in order, everything perfectly routine. But in a matter of seconds, that normal day turned into something else entirely. The officer didn't see a successful businessman. He saw something else, something that made him stop, question, and accuse. The terminal fell silent as eyes turned, cameras raised, and judgment filled the air. What happened next wasn't just about a misunderstanding. It was a moment that forced everyone watching to confront an uncomfortable truth. Because, when power meets prejudice, who really has to prove their worth? It was one of those mornings that began in quiet confidence. Jaden adjusted the cuffs of his navy blue suit as he stepped out of the car, the early light glinting off his polished shoes. The airport buzzed with its usual rhythm, rolling suitcases, distant announcements, and the faint smell of coffee drifting through the terminal. For most people, it was just another day of travel. For Jaden, it was business as usual. He had done this 100 times before. Flight meetings, investor presentations, handshakes that built futures. Years of hard work had earned him this life. The tailored suits, the first-class tickets, the quiet nods of respect in boardrooms. But beneath that success lay a truth he never escaped. The way eyes followed him a little longer. The pauses that lingered before greetings. The quiet question that seemed to whisper, "Does he really belong here?" Still, Jaden had learned to move past it, to carry himself with calm certainty, to let his professionalism speak louder than any prejudice could. As he rolled his suitcase through the sleek glass doors, a sense of anticipation flickered in his chest. Another flight, another deal, another milestone. He checked his boarding pass, glancing briefly at the security checkpoint ahead. The line was long, moving slowly under the watchful eyes of uniformed officers. He sighed, pulling out his passport. Nothing unusual, nothing to worry about. At least, that's what he thought. But sometimes, ordinary moments have a way of shifting. Suddenly, quietly, and completely. Because beyond that checkpoint, a pair of watchful eyes had already fixed on him. Eyes that didn't see a businessman or a traveler. They saw something else, something they thought didn't belong in that space of privilege and control. And for Jaden, what started as another morning of success was about to become a lesson in what power looks like when it hides behind a badge. Jaden placed his laptop on the conveyor belt, slipping off his watch and belt with practiced efficiency. The rhythmic hum of the security checkpoint filled the air. Bins clattering, scanners beeping, shoes shuffling across cold tiles. It was routine, mechanical, predictable. Until it wasn't. "Sir, step aside." The voice cut through the noise, sharp and commanding. Jaden looked up. A security officer stood at the edge of the checkpoint. A tall man with a rigid stance, his expression unreadable, but his tone carrying weight. Jaden blinked, confused. He had followed every instruction. His items were in the bin, his pockets empty. "Is there a problem?" he asked calmly. The officer's gaze didn't waver. "Random check," he said curtly, motioning for Jaden to move toward the side area. But Jaden noticed no one else was being randomly checked. Not the businessman behind him with his designer luggage. Not the group of tourists fumbling with passports. Just him. He complied silently, moving toward the inspection table. A second officer joined in, rifling through his neatly packed briefcase, pulling out folders and electronics with unnecessary force. Jaden's jaw tightened. He kept his voice even, careful. He knew how quickly things could turn. Minutes dragged. The crowd's attention began to turn toward the scene. Whispers floated. Some looked away, others stared. The officer's questions grew pointed. "Where are you headed? What's your purpose of travel? Who are you meeting?" Each question carried an undertone, as if success didn't belong to someone like him, as if his calm confidence was a mask for something criminal. He answered each question clearly, his voice steady. But inside, frustration brewed. He could feel it building. The quiet humiliation of being treated like a suspect in a space he had every right to be in. Then, one officer held up his passport. "This yours?" he asked as if testing him. Jaden nodded slowly, biting back his words. The officer's next move was deliberate. He turned, showing the passport to another guard, murmuring something under his breath before looking back with narrowed eyes. "We're going to need to run a verification," he said. Verification. A word that carried the weight of disbelief. Jaden exhaled, glancing at his watch. His flight boarded in less than 20 minutes. He looked at the officer again, trying to keep his tone respectful. "Sir, I'm going to be late for my flight. You can see my ID, my ticket. Everything matches." But the officer only smirked slightly. "Then you should have gotten here earlier." The words hit harder than they should have, not because of what was said, but the way it was said. Dismissive, mocking. Like he wasn't a businessman with a meeting across the country, but an inconvenience to be put in his place. Jaden's pulse quickened. The people nearby could hear now. He could feel their eyes, their judgments forming silently. He wasn't just being delayed, he was being diminished. And then, as if on cue, the officer leaned closer. "What's your full name?" he demanded. Jaden hesitated. Not because he didn't know, but because of what came next. He had seen how easily moments like this could spiral, how quickly calm could be mistaken for defiance. The officer's tone sharpened. "I said, your name?" Jaden met his eyes, finally, fully, and something in his gaze shifted. The power dynamic cracked for just a moment. Because what the officer didn't realize was that the name he was demanding carried history. Centuries of resilience, pride, and survival. And before this day ended, that name would remind everyone in that terminal that dignity can't be checked, searched, or silenced. The terminal seemed to grow quieter, though the hum of announcements still echoed faintly overhead. Jaden stood by the inspection table, his bag emptied, his belongings scattered across the cold metal surface. The officer's stare burned into him, a mix of authority and disdain. The second officer lingered nearby, arms crossed, watching as if waiting for Jaden to make one wrong move. "Say your full name," the officer repeated, louder this time, loud enough for the nearby travelers to hear. Heads turned, phones tilted, some recording discreetly. Jaden's pulse thudded in his ears. He had seen videos like this before. He knew how quickly moments like this could twist, how easily calm men could become targets. His voice came low but clear. "Jaden Thompson," the officer frowned. "Spell it." It wasn't a request, it was a test. Jaden's jaw tightened, but he complied. "Jaden, the officer scribbled on a notepad, then smirked. "Common name. You sure this ID isn't fake?" The question sliced through him. Jaden took a step forward, the frustration in his chest rising like fire. "That ID is legitimate. You can verify it. Right now." But the officer didn't move. He just stared, a smirk tugging at the edge of his mouth. "Watch your tone." The words came like a warning, but what they really meant was, know your place. Something inside Jaden cracked. For too long, he had bitten his tongue, swallowed his pride, played the role expected of him. But not this time. Not here. He straightened, meeting the officer's gaze head-on. "My tone?" His voice was calm, steady, but it carried the weight of generations. "My tone doesn't change the truth. My ID's real. My ticket's real. The only thing false here is your assumption about who I am." The crowd around them froze. Even the officer blinked, his smirk faltering for the first time. Silence pressed heavy in the air. Then the sound of footsteps echoed. A supervisor approached, drawn by the tension. "What's going on here?" The officer turned quickly, trying to speak first, but the supervisor's eyes caught the sight of Jaden's credentials on the table. A gold business ID badge with embossed lettering, Thompson Global Holdings, CEO. The officer's expression shifted from superiority to shock. His lips parted, but no words came. The power dynamic flipped in a heartbeat. Jaden didn't gloat. He simply reached for his passport, his voice level. "You wanted my name? Now you know it," the crowd whispered. Cameras clicked. And in that single, suspended moment, it wasn't just one man being corrected. It was a system being exposed. The silence that followed was deafening. The officer stepped back, his authority stripped bare under the weight of truth. His posture stiffened, his eyes darting to the supervisor who now looked at Jaden with quiet recognition and shame. The crowd, once unsure whether to intervene, had become witnesses to a reversal they didn't expect to see. Phones stayed up, capturing every frame, every breath, every consequence. Jaden calmly gathered his belongings, sliding his ID and ticket back into his jacket pocket. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. The moment spoke for itself. Years of restraint, of being second-guessed and disrespected, had led to this, not an explosion of anger, but a revelation of dignity. The supervisor muttered an apology, his voice small, almost swallowed by the noise of the terminal. "We're sorry for the misunderstanding, sir." But Jaden didn't reply. He simply nodded once, his gaze fixed on the officer who had demanded his name like a weapon. "You wanted my name?" his silence seemed to say. "Now, live with what it means." As he walked toward his gate, the stares followed, some admiring, some uncomfortable, most reflective. The power that once sought to humiliate him had instead revealed its own ignorance. And though the incident had ended, its impact lingered, not only on him, but on everyone who had witnessed it. Because this wasn't just about one officer and one man. It was about every moment when prejudice hides behind a badge, a title, or a system, and every person who refuses to bow beneath it. Jaden didn't leave the airport angry. He left it changed, empowered, but also burdened by a truth too many already know. Respect shouldn't be something you have to prove. The question is, how many more names, faces, and stories will it take before the world stops demanding proof of humanity and starts recognizing it? Don't miss more powerful real-life stories. Hit subscribe now.